Whales, scientifically known as cetaceans, are creatures that, considering their common land-based ancestor, have been living on Earth for about 50 million years. The change in lifestyle from land to water is one of the most spectacular examples of evolution. In this material I will show you what their evolution looked like, what families and species currently live. I will talk about the rather unusual impact of whales on the ocean ecosystem and what future holds for them. About 50 million years ago, in what is now Pakistan and India, there lived small land mammals, from which modern cetaceans are descended. One of the oldest known ancestors was Pachycetus, a wolf-like animal that spent most of its time on land, but increasingly hunted in shallow waters. From an evolutionary point of view, the more often an organism uses a particular environment, the greater the chance of new adaptations emerging that increase its chances of survival. For example, Pachycetus increasingly dived in search of food. With each successive generation, its lungs became larger and over time, changes occurred throughout its body that adapted it to life in water. About 48 to 47 million years ago, a successor to Pachycetus appeared, Ambulocetus, known as the walking whale. It was able to move freely along the bottom of water bodies, as evidenced by its thick and heavy limb bones. Similar to today's hippos, this structure prevented it from floating to the surface, allowing Ambulocetus to walk on the bottom instead of floating in the water. Ambulocetus was an active predator. Its diet consisted mainly of fish, amphibians, and small land animals that came to the water. It probably hunted from ambush, lurking in shallow pools, much like modern crocodiles. In the water, it moved with undulating motion of its entire body, resembling the swimming style of otters, although it did not yet have the tail fin typical of today's whales. About 46 to 45 million years ago, Remingtonocetus lived, which was even better adapted to life in water. Its body was more streamlined, and its elongated snout and sharp teeth indicate a diet based mainly on fish and marine invertebrates. Remingtonocetus spent most of its time in the water, where it hunted actively, although it still retained the ability to move on land. Unlike modern toothed whales such as dolphins and killer whales, these ancient cetaceans did not use echolocation. They hunted mainly by sight and by sensing vibration in the water. It was not until much later, with further evolution, that the advanced navigation and hunting systems we see in modern cetaceans today appeared. Over time, whales became increasingly independent of land. Species such as Myacetes show that even then, behaviors typical of today's cetaceans were developing. Females probably gave birth to their young in the water. About 40 million years ago, fully aquatic whales such as Basilosaurus appeared. Although it looked like a giant sea snake, it had small vestigial hind limbs, the last remnants of its land-dwelling ancestors. Such remnants are still found among cetaceans today. This is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for evolution in modern animals. In general, whales are the best and most clear example that can be used to study evolution. Pachycetus measured between 1 and 2 meters, while Basilosaurus was truly a leviathan among predators, fully adapted to life in water. It measured up to 20 meters in length and was the apex predator. In 10 million years, a small land animal transformed into the terror of the oceans of that time. This is a relatively short time in terms of evolution. Why did this happen? What made cetaceans so successful? Whales evolved so quickly because they entered an almost empty food-rich environment that had long been devoid of dangerous predators. The oceans of the Eocene were warm and rich in food. These almost ideal conditions mean that today we can admire the largest animal that had ever lived on our planet, the blue whale. From these ancient forms, two main lines of modern cetaceans developed: baleen whales, which include fin whales and humpback whales, filtering food from the water using baleen plates, and toothed whales, such as sperm whales and dolphins, which actively hunt using echolocation. Okay, but what is a cetacean? Cetaceans are marine mammals that spend their entire lives in water. They breathe with lungs and, like all mammals, feed their young with milk. Currently there are 15 species of baleen whales and about 66 species of toothed whales. Among the more advanced ones we can observe cooperation, the best example being orcas, killer whales. When hunting seals they can work together to create waves that push the seals off the ice. There is a division of roles within a pod of orcas. Guards observe the area and ensure that their prey does not escape. Attackers launch attacks on prey. Coordinators synchronize the movement of the herd. This group is particularly visible when hunting young whales. Cetaceans also include oceanic and river dolphins, porpoises and sperm whales. Several species of whales can also be observed in Baltic Sea. The only permanent Baltic cetacean is the harbor porpoise. Occasionally, bottlenose and common dolphins can be observed entering the Baltic Sea from the North Sea. The rarest sight in the sea are baleen whales. Due to the low salinity, low temperature and small amount of food, encountering a whale is almost impossible, but such episodes have occurred. A good example here is a fin whale washed ashore, whose skeleton can be seen at the marine station in Hel Peninsula. It measures over 17 meters. It is also worth remembering that most whales that ever existed are now extinct. From the fossil record we know of about 200 extinct species of toothed whales and nearly 100 species of baleen whales. Among them are both very primitive forms and transitional species, documenting the successive stages of whales' evolution. Importantly, not all extinctions belong to the distant past. An example is the Baiti river dolphin, which was found exclusively in one of China's rivers, the Yangtze. After intense human activity, including dam construction and environmental degradation, the species was declared extinct in 2007. To date, no representative of this unique animal has been observed. Many modern whales are also teetering on the brink of survival today, mainly as a result of our exploitation of the oceans, underwater noise, pollution and climate change. The most endangered are baleen whales, which filter plankton. Their food consists mainly of krill, tiny organisms floating in the water that are very sensitive to chemical and climatic changes. Human activity has a significant impact on their survival. Ocean acidification reduces the number of krill in the oceans, which is the basis of the ocean food chain. Ships that filter water and plankton for economic purposes do not help them either. All this means that baleen whales have to face increasingly difficult conditions. One of the threats that led to the death of up to 19% of whales was whaling. Whales were killed mainly for their fat, meat and baleen, which people used to make sailing tools, corsets or even street lighting. In 1994, the last whaling station ceased operations, allowing whales populations to slowly recover. Despite the increase in the numbers of many species, their future is still threatened. Many scientists warn that whales may face complete extinction in the human era if our activities continue to destroy the oceans. At the same time, there is hope. It all depends on how much we protect marine ecosystems in the future. When thinking about whales, it is easy to get the impression that they are just huge animals that benefit from the ocean, without giving anything in return. In fact, the opposite is true. Whales have a huge impact on the functioning of the oceans. If whaling had never taken place and whales' populations had not declined by about 19%, our seas and oceans would be much more fertile and biologically diverse today. What is more, the mass extinction of cetaceans caused by human activity may have led to the extinction of many species that we never even had a chance to discover. One of the key mechanisms by which whales support life in the oceans is a phenomenon called the whale pump. In a nutshell, it means that whales, due to their enormous size, produce huge amounts of poop, which is exceptionally rich in nitrogen and iron. These elements are key to the development of plankton. The more whales there are in the ocean, the more of these elements end up in surface waters, leading to intensive plankton growth. In the past, this meant that the oceans were much more productive than they are today. To clarify, phytoplankton are microscopic aquatic plants that drift in the water, while zooplankton are tiny animal organisms that feed on them. These two elements form the basis of the entire marine food chain. The more plankton there is, the more fish and predators there are, and consequently, the greater the biodiversity of the oceans. With the decline in the numbers of whales, the amount of this fuel of life in the oceans has significantly decreased. This has probably led to the extinction of many species that disappeared before humans had a chance to learn about them. However, the impact of the whale pump does not end with increasing the amount of food. The growth of phytoplankton has another key effect: oxygen production. Phytoplankton is responsible for producing more than half of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, more than all forests combined. The more whales there are in the oceans, the more nutrients reach the surface waters, which means more phytoplankton and more oxygen production. At a time when whales' populations were much larger, the oceans were not only teeming with life, but also more effectively regulated the composition of the Earth's atmosphere. So, it can be said that whales indirectly influence what we breathe. Their presence supports one of the most important biological processes on our planet: photosynthesis in the oceans. When whales disappear, not only does the marine ecosystems weaken, but so does the ocean's ability to produce oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide. Sometimes old or seriously ill whales separate from the pod and make their last very deep dive. Although we do not know if this is a conscious decision, observations suggest that some individuals do not attempt to return to the surface. Their bodies then sink to the deepest regions of the ocean, initiating a process that is of great importance to life in the deep sea. The impact of whales on the oceans does not end with their death. When a whale's body sinks to the bottom of the ocean, a phenomenon known as a whale fall occurs. For the deep sea, where light does not reach and food is extremely scarce, this is one of the most important sources of energy. A dead whale provides the bottom with up to several dozen tons of organic matter. In the first stage, scavengers appear: sharks, hagfish, crabs, which eat the soft tissues for months, sometimes years. Then the remains are decomposed by bacteria, enriching the bottom sediments with nutrients. The most remarkable stage begins when only the skeleton remains. Whale bones contain enormous amounts of fat and can feed chemosynthetic bacteria for up to several decades. Specialized organisms develop around them, such as osedagworms, which literally eat the bones, and species found exclusively at whale falls. For the ocean depths, a single dead whale acts as a long-lasting oasis of life, connecting seafloor ecosystems and increasing biodiversity in places where life is normally almost impossible. Although whales are often associated with solitary giants roaming the oceans, in reality many species lead complex social lives, comparable to those observed in primates or elephants. Each herd has its own culture, unique sounds, hunting techniques and behaviors not found in other populations. This is one of the few examples of animal culture that is not genetically transmitted but learned. Humpback whales cooperate during hunts by creating so-called bubble nets. They surround schools of fish with a ring of air, forcing them to gather in one place. This makes it easier to catch them in their mouths. Interesting facts: dolphins give each other names. Each individual has a distinctive signature whistle. Many whales exhibit behaviors suggestive of mourning, such as females carrying dead calves for many days. All these behaviors prove their high intelligence and self-awareness. When it comes to language, each species of whales has its own unique language, which changes from generation to generation. Young whales sometimes speak differently than their parents, something like slang, which suggests that this language is conscious and that whales know what they are saying, when and why. There are various forms of communication: singing, most commonly known among humpback whales, clicking, typical of sperm whales, and whistling, and squeaking among dolphins. Will we ever be able to talk to whales? It's not yet known, although attempts have been made. In one experiment, an interdisciplinary team of researchers exchanged greetings with a female long-finned pilot whale named Twain. For 20 minutes, the animal's behavior suggested that it was consciously responding to human messages. Today, scientists are experimenting with artificial intelligence to understand the language of whales. Time will tell if we will be ever able to truly talk to them. Finally, I would like to say that each of the topics discussed deserves at least a few hours of lecture time. The knowledge in this film is presented in a nutshell, which is only meant to introduce you to the amazing world of whales. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.